Good morning and welcome to Restoration Road. I am Judge Wendy Davis. I am not Mitch Kruse, but sitting next to me is the wonderful Mitch Kruse, who invited me here this morning along with Shirley Woods, who runs the Ewell Wilson Youth Center downtown Fort Wayne, and Pastor, well, I know you as Pastor Kelly Bird, and it's my pleasure to be here. And I have to say, in the forum that we are sitting in this morning, I want to say thank you to Chuck Surak and Lisa Surak of Sweetwater Sound. It's an incredible place to be taping such a valuable show. So
it is beautiful.
Mitch?
What a setting.
Well done,
all
Wendy.
these cars.
Would
Yeah,
you like
very
a
good
good job?
job.
Very well done.
Wendy, could you just teach us Philippians 2, please? You're on a roll.
Truth be told, I had to rally to do the opening. So now that and interestingly, what we're talking about is imitating Christ's humility.
Yes.
So I guess I was so prideful that I wanted to be the one in charge because I'm used to being in charge. So okay,
Yes, you
Mitch,
are.
I will hand it over to you as we go through Philippians 2 this morning.
Well, we've talked about joy in suffering in Philippians 1, and today we're going to start in Philippians 2, joy in serving. And serving is the sweet spot of joy. The Apostle Paul said that this joy is discovered at the intersection of serving Christ's interests, our unselfish interests, and the interests of others. Arthur Ashe, the great tennis player who gave his life to serving both on and off the court, advocated that joy could only be found in serving others. He actually said that. And just like the heart of the tennis racket is a sweet spot, so the sweet spot of joy resides in the heart of Christ, the servant. So, Kelly, would you mind picking it up in Philippians 2 and just read the first two verses?
Yeah, Philippians 2:1 says, "Therefore, if there is any encouragement in Christ, if there is any consolation of love, if there is any fellowship of the Spirit, if any affection and compassion, make my joy complete by being of the same mind, maintaining the same love, united in spirit, intent on one purpose."
So first, we need to serve Christ's interests. We need to be united with Christ in order to serve his interests. And too often, we pretend to unite ourselves with Christ only to seek our own selfish desires. I think that left to ourselves and our own selfish bent, that's what we're going to do. However, joy comes when we humbly unite our hearts with Christ in order to serve his interests. So Jesus, who was humble in heart, taught his followers that humility toward God would be rewarded in a reconciled relationship with him. That's Luke 18:14. Serving Christ's interests. Kelly, you grew up a child of a pastor, and you saw some things when you're, 17, 18, that weren't as they should be. And you got kind of angry at the world, didn't you?
I did.
What happened? How did that all unfold? And take us up to sitting at John MacArthur's church in the back.
Yeah, I just, after years and years and years of wrongfully but understandably idolizing a man and being blown away by and amazed by his gifts and his abilities in the church, which were genuine and God used in amazing ways. Yeah, my family just blew up. My dad ended up leaving, and it was a hard, discouraging, confusing thing. And he and my mom's marriage just kind of, it disintegrated, and there turned out to be years and years and years of some patterns that were pretty disheartening. So I think at 18 I just said, screw it. I don't believe in him, little h, my dad, anymore. I don't even know if I believe in God. I certainly don't believe in this thing called ministry in the church. I was angry and mad and upset and lonely and confused. So I just walked away. Walked away as fast and as hard as I could. Did as many things as I possibly could think of that they had told me all my life not to do. Was just upset and felt betrayed, and he let me. I think God, I learned in seminary some years later about efficacious grace. It's the kind of grace that God extends when he draws us to himself. And about 3 years of living pretty hard and living in the dark, he efficaciously began to draw me to himself. And really a chance to know him. I had been around God my whole life, but I never really knew the Lord personally. So at 20, that's when
How did that
things-
happen? I mean, how do you go from, so all of us that have grown up in the church, I think we've all strayed at some time or another, maybe not
Yep.
everybody. Okay,
No,
I'll
we
speak for
have.
myself.
We're going to get there.
Yeah. So I guess, I mean, how does that look? How does that feel for God to do that and for you then to know Him differently?
What I had known my whole life, I thought was it.
Right.
But then you realize as things begin to unravel, it wasn't it. And then when you begin to experience it, when you really truly begin to experience full surrender, a real relationship with a living God, not a lifestyle based upon who your dad was, but a real intimate personal relationship with the King, it's just overwhelming. So yeah, it was incredible.
He used the Word of God, the people of God, the Spirit of God to draw you in. And remember the Romans passage?
Yeah, it was Romans 7, oh wretched man that I am, sitting in the back row, far right side with Dr. MacArthur, Grace Community Church in LA there. September 1983, and I had been through the 3 years I had been through and slowly had just gotten to this place where I realized it really was dark and it wasn't fulfilling and there was no joy. And I was a mess, and I knew it. And so I'm sitting in the back row, and he's preaching through Romans 7, and he gets to that verse where it says, "O wretched man that I am, who will save me from this body of death?" And I can feel it, even as I say it right now. I can just remember that sense that came over me, like this was the moment. Here was this point in time where God had brought me to, where He was gonna rescue me. So that night, September 83.
That is really powerful. And actually, Kelly, I don't think I've ever heard that story. I mean, I've kind of heard renditions of it from you, and you've made such an impact in our own community. And I think it's so good when you see someone like yourself that we all kind of say, oh, he's got it together.
Yeah.
You know, to realize that there's so many people where their life is just falling apart.
Yeah.
You know, their life is just completely falling apart, and they're in that darkness. But, I mean, what you've just described is the true hope that I think so many of us are looking for.
I found that in my life, you go through a period where you know of God. You know, you heard about God. I was raised in the church. I heard about God. I thought I knew God. But then it comes a time when it's not what you heard about Him, it's what you experience with Him. Mm-hmm. So it's one thing to hear about, but it's another thing to know for yourself. And even my daughters, after going through the things that we went through, you know, with their brother, my one daughter, she actually ventured out and started studying other beliefs. She was hurt, you know, she was in a lot of pain from it, but she went around just to come back to the place where she actually knows Christ for herself. Mm. She was living off mom's belief, but she had to get to a place where it became her belief. And so sometimes the things of this world and the things we go through will force you into a place where you need to find God for yourself.
Yeah.
And not, you know, your parents' belief.
I think that kids that grow up in a Christian home go through this process. When it comes in terms of the faith that their parents have, they'll borrow it, they'll rent it, they'll lease it, and then finally, hopefully, they own it.
Yeah.
But they're just kind of experimenting all the way through.
Right.
That's really powerful. Have you ever had a season in your beautiful life where you weren't serving Christ's interests?
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Really, Shirley? Because if so, all of us that know you, we want to know, because that's going to make us feel a lot better.
Oh, yeah. I did. I went through a divorce, and when I did, now prior to that, I was kind of in and out. You know, I wasn't solid or anything like that. But after,
it's hard to picture, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, you almost can't even fathom what she's saying.
Yeah, you can. I tell you, but it was, you know, I had to find Christ for myself too, and so I went through a divorce and just had some horrible things to happen. And my husband, he knows, we can talk about it now. Mm-hmm. But even when you'll pass, I was going through a bad marriage. At the same time, I was going through the death of my son. But my relationship with him, it became solid, and it came over time. But no, Shirley, no, I have not been saved all my life. And I did some things that, I'm not proud of. But again, I found that grace, to get back to that place and to get to know this Christ that I had heard about for so long.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I went through a season of about, a little less than a decade of just making it all about serving my own interests, selfishly. And it's interesting what happens to you. I mean, you can surrender your life to Christ at an early age, but you can easily take control of your own life and put him in your back pocket and keep him as an insurance policy and maintain control of your own life. And I think that's what happened to me. And it wasn't until I got to a point similar to one you described, Kelly, where I thought, there's got to be a different way. Yeah. I've done something with what I've grown up with on my foundation, and I've twisted it. I've made it religion. I've made it about me. I've just haven't seen the relevance of it in the marketplace, and it transformed me when I thought, well, wait a minute. Christ transformed me, but when I thought I could make a collector car auction about God somehow, and I wanted to know more about that concept. Judge, you probably don't want to name names or offer details, but you've been transparent and said there's been seasons in your life where you weren't serving Christ's interests. Can you sort of describe that for us?
Yes. It's interesting to listen to Kelly talk because about, I grew up also in a household that God was very prevalent. We went to church on Sunday nights, Wednesday nights. I was kind of forced into youth group and that kind of thing. And I went to college and kind of considered myself at Homestead High School a pretty good girl, but definitely straight in high school. I mean, we all did that. But no, I found myself even later on in life just doing my own thing, living my own life, doing what Wendy wanted to do. And I found out extremely quickly how you can lose what God has given you, I mean, the Lord has blessed me throughout my life with my family, with my health. I mean, I can just go on and on and on. And surely, I mean, you're correct. God's grace is bigger than my sin, because at a time in my life where, candidly, and it was even later when I thought I could pretty much lose everything, I mean, the word restoration, I think it's so ironic that I'm sitting on Restoration Road. True restoration came to my life. I live now and daily thankful. Thankful for my husband, for my children, for my family, for my life. The fact that God's put me in a position now that I'm sitting on a criminal court bench. All of these things that I'm hoping, that I do hope and pray, that every single day, like we were talking about previously, that I can look at something written on my hand saying, am I doing this and living for the Lord? Because the Lord has I felt it, Kelly. I have felt it in my life. That's why I was asking you, what was it? That true wake-up call where you realize, oh my gosh, this God that I worship, he is a real God, because I'm a mess. I am such a mess. Yeah. And I have all of these things that he's given me, and I've been raised in this Christian home and given all these tools, and I know the right way to live and do it. I just chucked it all and said, no, I'm living for Wendy. And yet, God came back. Not came back. I think he was always there and present. Right. But his grace, so much bigger than my sin. And that's when I realized truly that God's restoration, his grace is real. And my faith is real when people ask me about my faith. And I don't necessarily talk about it every single day, but I hope because of the grace he's shown me in my life that at least people can see it, or they can feel it, because it is so real to me now that he's taken me out of that darkness and really put me into the light. And I use the light in a way that it's his face, it's his work, and that my life is his. I am still a sinner, and I don't live my life always the way I should, but every time I even doubt it or think it, or if Satan creeps in, I can take myself back and I can say that that's not who I am or what I want to be, and I want to live it. I want to live for God in God's grace, but yet live in that humility as we just read about, living for Him.
I think the common thread is on how we transition from serving our selfish interests to serving the interests of Christ is that we're willing to fully surrender our hearts and say, you're Lord of my life. And that leads to surrendering our desires, kind of the beat of our hearts. And that leads to surrendering our three resources of life, our time, our talent, and our treasures. We're now ready to say, so this all can be used in a whole different way to serve Christ, no matter where I am, whether I'm a judge or have started a nonprofit organization or have led a church, whatever that is, a business in the marketplace. I can do this for Christ's interests, and that's a radical paradigm shift, especially in our Western culture.
And I think it's interesting in the sense, too, Mitch, that it's really easy to say that, and honestly, just to come on TV and go, oh, yes, my time, talent, I'm going to give it all to Christ, and then to walk out of here and actually live it.
Exactly.
Because I think that so many things in life, especially as we move through life, and we've all had different successes, whether it's in our family or, getting through things, it is so easy to go back and do what I want to do half an hour from now, and not always keeping in the back of my mind. I mean, I fail every single day. I fail every day. And that it's almost sad. Like I don't want to have to constantly remind myself, but because of my sin nature, because of who I am, I do. I mean, but it's funny because even when sometimes I stumble, Christ gently tells me, Wendy, remember why you're doing all this. Remember why you're here, why I put you where you are, why I put you in the family that you're in, why I gave you the husband that you have. All of these things that I so much take for granted. If I want to say that I continually have to remind myself, but really I think it's God continuing to love me and say.
Yeah. That's the key right there. I thank God for the Holy Spirit that will nudge us and whisper to us and just get us to where we need to be. I often pray, I trust you to get me to where you want me to be. I know I can do nothing without Him. I'm settled on that. I like that place of humility now because the responsibility then falls on Him. I'm just, your child, you're guiding me, you're leading me. But humility to me is a safe place, because I know that I'm not responsible. He is, and that's why I give Him the praise and the glory and the honor, because it's Him that's doing it. And then it becomes very relaxing for me. I can rest in the fact that He's going to take care of me.
That is so incredible to hear you say that, because that is the difference between saying I'm a believer and I'm a Christ follower. Because, I mean, even the demons believe, but the difference between, so there's a belief, and I think a lot of us get caught up in going, sure, I believe in God. It's what you just described, though. It's the faith. It's the total relinquishment of, God, you're in control, and I'm going to do what you want me to do with my time, talent, and...
Yeah, what you just said is the hardest thing for me, because in my business, results were a consequence of my actions, I could see a buyer and seller getting connected before either one knew he wanted to sell or buy. And so that was going on. And then in ministry, I prayed with scores of people to surrender their lives to Christ. And so as Kelly, and I'm pretty sure each one of those were asked, in some fashion or another. So it's really, when I hear you say what you just said, man, I'm doing a self-inventory right on the spot and saying, I need more of that, for sure.
I just showed up today just so I could spend time with Shirley.
Yeah, me too.
Not that I don't appreciate
Welcome
you
to the
and
Restoration
Kelly.
Road with Shirley Woods.
Yes, I know. Just because, just her wisdom that pours out of her, is amazing.
I found myself, though, I don't want to say force into, where I had to go, but I do recognize the fact that in order for God to get me to where He wanted to get me, I had to go through what I went through. And he knew that He could get me there. And he knew that eventually I would allow him to get me there. But, you know, I resisted. I fought. Who wants to go through pain? Who wants to go
Right.
through trials and tribulations? But you eventually get to a place that he really does know more than me. He really does have the ability to get me there. So why you keep fighting against it? That took a while to get to that kind of mindset. But I have to constantly, you know, stay in this word and allow the word of God to feed my mind and my heart to stay on this path that it's not about Shirley, it's about him. So it can't be Shirley focused. I must stay God focused. Do I do it 24/7? No. But I try to ask him and trust him to help me not to get focused on me. It's my trusting in him to get me, not me getting me there, because I won't make it. I trust him to get me there. So for me, I'm not taking responsibility for it. I want it to do it your way, and I'm trusting you to get me there, because if you depend on Shirley to do it, it's not going to happen.
Wow. So the way we'd apply this is we fully surrender our heart, our desires, our life. And the way to do that, to make it real, I think, is we offer God our calendars, our business cards, and our checking accounts. And that's where it gets kind of sticky. Am I really willing to look at this calendar, look at my to-do list, look at my business card, maybe cross out the title and put servant of Christ on there? Am I willing to do that? And that's challenging. But that's how we begin to experience joy in serving him and not ourselves. That's how we're designed. At the end of the day, I mean, I think that's the most powerful argument for it, is that's how we're designed. And so when we start doing this, we actually feel differently about life. Kelly, could you read Philippians chapter 2, verses 3 and 4?
Absolutely. It says in Philippians 2, verse 3, it says, "Do nothing from selfishness or empty conceit, but with humility of mind regard one another as more important than yourself. Do not merely look out for your own personal interests, but also for the interest of others."
So, second, we serve our unselfish interests. That's right. It's acceptable to serve our own interests when they flow from a humble heart surrendered to Christ. An example would be wisdom. It's good for us to get wisdom. It's good for us to go down that road. Okay. Solomon said that he who gets wisdom loves his own soul, Proverbs 19:8. We're going to get to the rest of what Kelly just read, but I think what we're looking at here is three circles, and we're now on the second. The first one was serving Christ's interests, and now we got our unselfish interests. So we're now in this picture, and we want to see those circles come closer and closer together. Can you think of a time where you've wrestled with this, where you thought, well, if I do that, is that really for me or is that for God? And then, kind of got clarity on it.
You maybe more than anybody in all my years, you helped me with this when years ago, and I don't, whether you coined the phrase or not, doesn't matter. The fact is you introduced into my life a phrase that every encounter is a divine appointment. And I used to view many encounters as interruptions.
Me too.
And thus would not give myself to it or them, him or her, whatever the situation. I used to view so much of that, my calendar and my things I had to do and the things I had planned. When you helped me understand that every encounter is a divine appointment and a chance to point someone, whether I knew about it or not, toward Christ, it revolutionized the way I looked at the bringing together of those two circles. Most profound thing I've ever learned on that front.
Well, that really ties into the third circle. So I'll wrap up the application on this. We need to just unselfishly seek a balanced budget, health. Maybe we're not treating our bodies the way we should. Good relationships, growth in wisdom. Maybe solicit a friend to help us in one of those areas of need, and meet once a week to discuss the progress. We know that what that one little meeting a week can do to somebody's life, that accountability. But you read something else, and that's the third circle, and it's serving others' interests. And actually considering them better than ourselves. Considering, I think, is an accounting term too, and it's like reconciling on the balance sheet. Yeah, to reckon that they're better than ourselves. That right there, just in of itself, is really hard. Everybody I'm going to run into, I'm going to consider or reckon better than myself.
More important.
So people outside Christ often attempt to connect with others, but it can be superficial and self-serving. Paul taught us to serve others from a heart that seeks their interests in Christ. Peter said that we should use our gifts from God to serve others in a way that releases God's grace in its various forms. So here's what I did. This is what I would say if I were asked what's the secret to success in business and ministry, whatever it is. And it would be those three circles getting closer and closer together to be concentric circles. Because I think if we look at our lives and did a little inventory, we'd say we'd have Christ's interests, our unselfish interests, and the interest of others. And where they overlap is pretty small. But that's how I started to make business decisions that changed my life by getting into the Word, is I wanted to make decisions where Christ's interests, my unselfish interests, I still needed to make payroll. I couldn't let everybody just cheat us or, you go on down that road. And then the interests of others. And the more I could make my decisions where those three circles intersected, the more joy I experienced. And I think that those people experienced as well.
Yeah.
Consider others better than yourself. I mean, that in and of itself is probably what we should take away this week. Looking for opportunities to serve others as if they were actually royalty. Make our muscles move with our prayers for God to use our challenges to serve someone going through a similar situation. And, go find that person and serve him. So we want to invite you today to experience joy in serving, to serve the interests of Christ, to just lay it all out there for him and say, Christ, I want to serve you and your interests. Make yourself real to me. And then to reevaluate how you serve your own interests. Are you serving your selfish interests or your unselfish interests? Things that God will use to advance the kingdom through you. And then finally, consider everyone better than yourselves as you serve them. And as those three circles, Christ's interests, your unselfish interests, and the interests of others grow closer and closer together, you're growing in your intimacy with God and your relationships with others, and that is truly an act of worship.